I projected 3:30 earlier on that satellite imagery. I think that's actually 4:30.
Signal number 5 PM Pag-asa update. It's literally just 5 kilometers per hour away from the requirement. So, sorry for cutting you on, but I'll just answer the question. So, go to the signal number 5 possibility. If the storm will not be upgraded to um, Super Typhoon category in Pag-asa scale, then most likely we won't see a signal number 5 because again, the signal number 5 TCWS signal and the Super Typhoon category in Pag-asa scale share the same requirement at around the storm has to be at around 220 kilometers per hour maximum sustained winds. 10 minutes by the way. Okay, so there.
Yeah, I mean, that's probably one of the best answers you get for it. But regardless of whether or not Signal 5 ends up coming to play, even if it doesn't, Signal 3 and 4, anyone in those areas should be taking this extraordinarily seriously. Just because there's a Signal 5, and those are extremely rare in the first place, doesn't mean that anyone should be taking the slightest less caution with this system.
I hope that's the case.
Very rare.
I hope that's the case because someone needs to do a case study on this. Because in storms in the past, we've noticed there's been a big drop-off in interest as soon as a storm loses Category 5 intensity, and that's the last thing you want to see because it's still 155 miles an hour, whatever it is at that point. This is still a Category 5, but even when it goes down to Category 4 and 3, it's still going to be a potential for major and widespread devastation.
The thing that Strat just said, actually only one typhoon utilized the TCWS number 5. Only one typhoon in its existence, that was Haima.
And this is much stronger than Haima, by the way.
Yeah, exactly. So if Pag-asa had given Haima the honors to have a signal number 5, how come Raleigh is not getting it when it clearly is a super? That is my opinion. I'm not like taking the blame them like that. It's just my opinion.
Yeah, it's mine as well. I certainly think there should be the highest level of warning for those areas right now because it's becoming quite clear that this storm is not going to weaken much before it strikes. The eye's wobbling a bit there on that imagery, Isaac. Are you seeing anything to suggest that it might be about to drop off, or is it going to continue?
Well, looking at this latest satellite trends that you can see in the last two frames, they're really well pronounced. Keep in mind these white splotches you see on the satellite imagery right here are -8 degrees Celsius cloud tops or cooler here. You're looking at right now, it goes off the scale here to give you kind of a reference of what's happening here. When you see those, tricolor wobbles that happen near the end of the loop there, that's a telltale sign of an eyewall different cycle there happening, and that's good and bad. Good because that of course weakens the storm slightly here, but bad of course because if it completes it, it'll increase the range of tropical storm force and typhoon force winds here, and help the storm maintain its intensity more. So kind of a double-edged sword we're looking at here, and again, still a serious storm regardless of what category it makes landfall at.
So is this now a third eyewall replacement cycle?
I believe so. I think it had a merger eyewall replacement cycle, I think nearly 2 days ago, and it had this one. I had another one actually overnight, I think, and I think it's trying to get going again because I'm assuming the other one failed and it's trying to complete it for real this time. And radar, we go back to radar here. I know it's cut off on the northern side here, or is that there it is. But you can see what I mean here. The eyewall replacement cycle there. You can see. There you go. You can see the outer eyewall here, right there. Hopefully you can see it there. That little outer eyewall, and you can see the strong inner eyewall there. And of course, it is cut off to the north, further to the north there because of the radar range here, unfortunately. But you can still see that inner eyewall that has, of course, those Category 5, 4 super typhoon winds. You can see that outer eyewall still present on radar.
So this remains still a very powerful Category 5 storm. which isn't weakening just yet. Eyewall replacement cycles, yes, but no indication on the satellite that it is weakening at least any more than the odd 5 mile an hour here and there. Still easily a Category 5 storm.
Very bad news.
Yeah, and even so, if, let's say, this eyewall replacement cycle tries to take more of a toll on it before it makes landfall, and you see the eye close up, and this thing, drops slightly below Category 5 status, or even tries to go below Super Typhoon status, which is hard-pressed to see happen in such a short time frame, considering it takes a while for winds to catch up to satellite views. It's still very important to call out to everyone watching that such a scenario would not make the storm any less dangerous or threatening to life and property to those in harm's way. I know a lot of media coverage is focused a lot on the wind speeds, and a lot of people either discount the storm if it isn't a typhoon or discount it if it's not a super typhoon. But this will still be extraordinarily life-threatening to where it comes offshore regardless.
It's going to be the strongest typhoon to ever hit Metro Manila. Well, we don't know yet because it hasn't happened, but it's one of the bigger threats that we've seen in recent years.
It will if the track persists that it will directly hit Manila. But as of now, most of the tracks are going more south than what they did on the tracks hours ago.
What we can still say is fortunate for Manila, at least, that their geography does give significant protection to the people living there compared to the other side of Luzon. The system's obviously going to be over land and over much more mountainous terrain and weaken substantially from when it makes landfall, or even right now, to when it actually crosses over Manila. But it isn't impossible to still see it, say, have winds of at least 160 kilometers plus per hour, 1 minute sustained, by the time it reaches Metro Manila.
And let's not forget of the east coast of Luzon there, which is pretty much where this storm is. This is statistically the area that gets the most tropical cyclones in the world. But even for those very high standards, this is an extremely powerful storm. Maybe not it's rivaling Angela's intensity, for those that remember Angela, which struck almost to this day 25 years ago. I think it was November the 1st or 2nd or both that Angela struck a little bit further north than what this storm's going to do by the looks of it now at this point.
Yeah, that storm peaked. I know for a fact it peaked on the 1st. I don't know what time it made landfall at, but I know for a fact it peaked on the 1st of 1995.
Again, looking at Isaac's imagery there too.
Yeah, I would also want to, put this in perspective. Say, this eyewall replacement cycle the storm is currently going under. Just say hypothetically here, it doesn't complete here and it fails, and it, continues to weaken it here. And say the storm makes landfall as, a low end, 150 mile an hour, or which is 150 miles an hour to be equivalent to about 241 kilometers an hour. Say this makes landfall at that intensity, still looking at a storm of similar magnitude to Hurricane Charlie. I know it's a different basin, but Hurricane Charlie of 2004 here in terms of the damage that you could kind of see with the storm of magnitude. Just because it may not be a Cat 5 at landfall, like Strat, Nathan, and all of us have been saying, does not mean we need to stop taking this typhoon seriously here. Like with Charlie, they saw really devastating impacts. That's that's a completely different storm, completely different basin. I know. But that storm had 150 mile an hour winds at landfall, which of course is not a Category 5, but still they got life-threatening and near catastrophic damage over there.
Latest imagery looks, I can't say anything other than interesting. Rapid scan right now. What's your imagery up to there, Isaac?
I'm gonna take a look here. Hold on, I'm waiting for it. 13 UTC.
1305. I've got 1319 here, and it looks very interesting. The eastern, it's like there's starting to be a bit of a mismatch. Definitely signs of eyewall replacement.
I want to note with the satellite imagery here, it's 10-minute increments here. HMY does not go off for 15-minute increments unlike MPSat 1IR did. So the imagery, I don't know why, it's in the fives, but this is actually 13 UTC, not 1305 UTC.
Oh, right. But the latest I'm looking at is maybe it's starting that weakening trend now, but it's still got a long way to go until even it weakens from Category 5 to Category 4, because Category 5 starts at 160 miles per hour. This is at least 175.
And even so, it takes a while for sometimes, when appearances really change quickly for the winds to actually draw down a bit to match that too.
You don't just see 180, 175 mile an hour Cat 5 just all of a sudden in the span of like an hour or two go to like Cat 4 with 150 mile an hour winds. It doesn't work like that. It takes time for those winds to lower and gradually decrease in intensity here.
That's what models are calling for today, though. They're calling for this storm to weaken ridiculously quickly. I mean, we welcome it if that happens, but it's definitely not realistic.
Yeah, usually with storms like this, it takes time for those winds to catch up to satellite appearance. Like I said, say this goes from 175 to Cat 4 in like an hour or two. Looks wise, does not mean we need to stop taking this typhoon seriously here. And like I said, it takes time for those winds to kind of catch up to that. So just still storming need to be taken seriously here. I know on the satellite imagery here, it looks like the eye is getting worse here in terms of clarity, but you can see those cloud tops there in the last two frames. Still at least negative 80 degrees Celsius and higher in some spots too.
I mean, you can't fault those cloud tops at all. It's amongst the best possible, really. You've not only got a ring of minus 80 degrees, it's more than that. You've probably got a full ring of minus 82 at least, nearly a full ring of minus 84, half a ring of minus 86. If that wraps around fully, which it shouldn't at this point, but if it did and it wrapped around fully and there was a 12-degree eye, then you've got a 200-mile-an-hour storm.
And keep up this color scale on this imagery band at least, the rainbow band. It peaks out at negative 82 Celsius. This is off the scale we're talking about right now. And usually you see this for, sheer tide, cold cloud top, tropical storm, a weak typhoon here. We're talking about a Category 5 typhoon right now. So it's completely different ballpark here. It's incredible.
So this storm will be striking in the early hours by the looks of things, as we've been saying for quite a while on our stream here. If you've got any comments or questions for us, we'll do our best, but given the flow of traffic right now, it might be difficult. Start your message with Force 13 all in text if you're watching us on our YouTube page, and you can send the messages through to Facebook as well, and one of our Philippine team members will pick that one up. Paul's still here. Anything you'd like to add at this point?
So with the current situation going on now, I think it's really best, in my personal opinion, I think it's really best that Pag-asa now upgrade the storm.
It's just, I don't know what to say about that. They've got it so low compared to what other agencies are saying. It's got to be.
I saw a question come in real quick that's probably good to go over because, I've seen it actually a lot during the stream. People are asking if it's possible to see Signal 4 in Laguna in association with the typhoon. I know there's always a lot of new people coming in and out. The simplest answer is based on their location, not particularly likely.
Alright, let's put it this way. Anywhere that's not in Bicol will probably not get Signal 4.
Yes, this way.
It's still quite possible that they can easily get Signal 3 though.
Well, yes. And don't forget they'll be updating again in just over an hour's time. We'll be there for that. And then we'll be wrapping up for the night, but we'll be back first thing, well, whenever the storm's making landfall, which could be before first thing in the morning. But no doubt we'll be here.
Yeah, and, even so, all those areas that are ending up, say, under Signal 3 instead of Signal 4, it is possible for the actual center of the system to track pretty close or over some of those areas, and everyone there should be taking, every precaution and instructions from the local official how to approach the system. We're in a fortunate situation where the actual center is very small. Typhoon winds extend at most right now about 35 nautical miles, so we're looking, around 60 kilometers for the widest extent. But even so, damaging winds, rainfall, storm surge, all those impacts are going to be much more spread out in association with this system.
Oh yeah, and that would also make sense, especially with the, like even though like the area of Typhoon force winds is going to be smaller, the areas that Typhoon force winds, the damage would be much more severe.
And that's the voice of Euxinator there as well. Welcome aboard. We're also watching this storm from Florida. And maybe at some point we'll get to mention Invest 96L, which could be headed your way.
Yeah, but, it wouldn't be heading directly to my area, it'd be south of my area, but,
If you look at the GFS model, you might change your mind. But that's another. So we've got a few events going on around the world. There's the Atlantic system. That could be another named storm to add to that ridiculous list for this year. It would be number 28.
Yeah, that's also incredible. Some of the models are going crazy about this storm already here too. So just another thing to watch here, and another thing to put on through this crazy year one we've had.
Unfortunately, we don't dedicate much time to that at all because going a much bigger system and a much more immediate system is about to strike the coast of the Philippines. The main core of the storm, the very high cloud top, looks like they're just about to reach the tip of Catanduanes there on the eastern coast. The eye of the storm getting closer at every turn, wobbling of course, but let's just get a very latest estimate on how close it is now. As of 19 minutes past the hour, this storm was located 109 miles from land, so that's 175 kilometers.
And what's our movement speed in the last hour or so or close to 2 hours since we started this stream as well?
I have no idea.
The last full update was saying 13 knots movement speed, so around 20 or so kilometers an hour.
Like ASA in their 8 p.m. update has put it at around 20 kilometers per hour, moving west-southwestward.
Alright, in the last hour it moved 17 miles.
Oh, 17 miles per hour.
That's closer to 30 kilometers an hour.
Yeah, if you extrapolate that, the movement that it's done in the last hour, and always be cautious about extrapolations because it never goes that way. But if we were to extrapolate it right now, the track would take it just a few miles south of Catanduanes now, actually not making landfall, and then moving into Albay, I believe. We're talking about 9 hours there.
There is some expectation right now, at least, that we'll see very shortly a more direct turn back to due west rather than a continuation west-south.
Well, that's what the JTWC are betting on, but the way it's going here, it's already going further south than expected. It's just about reached the same latitude as the northern tip of Catanduanes there. And when it's parallel with that, then, and it's still sinking, chances are really decreasing that it'll go north of that.
yeah, that's not going to be good, especially for Manila, because Manila, at the moment, the JWC still has Manila at around 0 towards the eye wall.
In the very short term, there's just a change in expectations despite the storm being far stronger. Typically stronger systems are better able to fight back against atmospheric forces And, for example, that would make you assume that this system would go further north instead than old expectations. But despite that, we've seen a constant and very substantial southward shift in track expectations over the past 2 days. 2 days ago we were looking at central Luzon for a landfall. Right now, Catanduanes are potentially south of that. The trend doesn't change very quickly. It could be the area that ends up receiving the first landfall from the system. So a very different situation unfolding even now than was expected 12 to 24 hours ago.
Some questions from earlier. How can Raleigh be compared with October 2006, a same named Milenio by the Philippines?
I think it's going to be stronger than that storm. Based on the way that it's stronger.
That one was strong, but Category 5, I think, wasn't it?
Highest wind speed recorded at Millennium was 230 kilometers per hour.
So mid-range Category 4.
Category 4 Typhoon, yeah.
How
So
long,
that's interesting.
how long will this last? Since it's slowing down, how many hours till it gets out of a town or region? I'm not sure I understand the end of that question, but as we said just before, potentially 9 hours till landfall if it misses Catanduanes, or maybe 7 hours if it was a hit directly.
And I think they're asking how long it'll take before it clears out of an area as well. You're
Oh,
looking
okay,
at
yeah.
a situation
I'm
where
sorry, yeah, I get that now.
from right now, by 24 hours from now, it should already be in the South China Sea. So if it takes the track expectation from several hours ago, if it deviates further to the south, it might be, still barely over a portion of the Philippines. But still about 24 hours from now, a little bit over that, you'll be seeing the system enter the South China Sea. At most, it'll take 30 to 36 hours for that to happen.
At that point, it will definitely be going due west.
And then back into Vietnam as well for more rainfall for areas that got absolutely doused by the past two systems. I saw a question that's important to go over as well, just because this has implications for the Philippines in a couple days too. They're saying, is the air of high pressure in the north going to be moving out? What looks like it's going to happen, if I'm not mistaken, I haven't seen the latest computer model run, is that you're going to see an initial move out of it, but another area of high pressure is going to set in very strong and then potentially steer the very disorganized Atsani, whatever it organizes into at that point, potentially to the southwest towards the Philippines at that point after slowing down and getting pushed to the southwest by that high pressure system. So down the line in middle and later next week, that's another threat to the Philippines.
Yeah, right now it's being pushed south by high pressure in front of that trough that's to its northeast. So north of there you see a lot of clear skies. That's high pressure there, centered. It's quite a broad high pressure, but the strongest part of it is over Japan right now at 1027 millibars. But over China as well, you've still got high 1010s, 1020s, and that's pushing the storm south. For instance, the northern tip of Luzon is at a pressure of 1014. And you see how close that is to the center of Goni. Very high pressure over there. And that's why it's being forced further south. That's the way it's going. It looks like it's going to be south just for the Philippines, and then it could move a little bit north again when it enters the South China Sea. As for Atsani, which is behind it, the high pressure is going to double down. There's a new one coming off the coast of China when we're looking there, maybe Wednesday or Tuesday, and that will push Atsani south. It was trying to recurve, but then it gets shunted towards the south, and that could be another typhoon landfall in Luzon next Thursday. And that's a high pressure in the 1020s again. And then after that, there's a weakness, but the next high pressure comes in by the time the next storm comes through. That's that area of interest on the far right of your image. And that's going to move into the South China Sea as well. They're all following each other. And then this is long-range GFS, but when you're talking towards mid-November, a lower latitude storm moving through Leyte, the central Visayas region, weak, but intensifying in the South China Sea, which would be just awful for Vietnam.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. We've just seen, despite of extreme lack of activity early in the season, we're heading at what looks to be an end storm total more average. But I really think
I always got the
storms
concerned feeling, Strat, that the Western Pacific was so quiet for so much of the season, it's just going to be one of these that has a crazy end. And then I saw the models, the extreme ultra long range models that were not always sure about, to say the least. And that was saying 3 weeks ago that the end of October, beginning of November would be mad.
Well, I mean, I think it really goes to serve the point that everyone should remember that it only takes one system, one storm to make an entire year for a place. So even if you've seen relatively low activity compared to normal, that can change at any instant. And that's unfortunately for the Philippines, what we're seeing right now with Raleigh's approach to landfall in the next several hours. And hopefully Asani remains weaker than currently expected. It does look pretty abysmal right now, and it is weaker than it was 2 days ago still. But right now, at least, we're on the verge of seeing a super typhoon landfall in the Philippines.
If we pan this, are we able to pan this image? Not easily. Let me just see if I can do this manually, type in some numbers, and hopefully it'll change. Yes, you can see further east now on this particular perspective. That is at Sani on the right-hand side of the image. That looks appalling. It's been shredded to bits by wind shear from the obviously much stronger Goni.
That's still forecast to reach typhoon intensity
It
too,
is.
as it
Yeah.
perhaps nears the Philippines as well, unfortunately.
Yeah, because what's going to happen is Asani's moving quicker to the west-southwest right now. It's still going to be moving quicker to the west into the South China Sea and then into Vietnam. Asani comparatively is moving slower and to the west-northwest and northwest right now. So that separation that it's going to have is going to leave it in a spot to where when it starts to get pushed southwest and west-southwest by the new area of high pressure, that it's still going to be in favorable enough conditions with Goni gone that it'll be able to try to organize and intensify. I saw a question as well about Batangas, which is south of Manila, about what impact you expect there. Yeah.
More or less, TCWS signal number 2 or 3 is possible.
Yep. Rainfall-wise, they're expecting increased air amounts compared to yesterday. Still important to keep in mind this is a small storm, so the worst impacts will be over a relatively thin area. But they could see there up to 200 to 300 millimeters of rainfall at a more regional level, localized higher amounts, of course.
Actually.
New rapid scan imagery showing that the eye is coming out again. I think Isaac can show us that too.
What does
No, don't do that. Not you, Nathan. The storm. Yeah, I can definitely see it in the last 2 frames. The eye is getting more clear there. You see, in the beginning of the frame, there's the kind of lighter blue, kind of aqua color there in the eye, and then later on, as time progresses, you see kind of like a deep navy blue, and then I think almost a pink there. You might see one little pixel there of the eye, so that's not a good sign at all. It's an indication that the eyeball replacement cycle may be indeed succeeding here and nearing completion right now, which would be, of course, not good news at all for the Philippines here.
By the way, Nathan, can I make a clarification very quickly?
Absolutely.
So, there has been comments in the YouTube chat stream that saying that Goni is not yet a typhoon. So I'll make it clear. JTWC has it at the super typhoon level right now. Meanwhile, Pag-asa hasn't. So I'm just gonna repeat this now. JTWC uses 1 minute sustained winds. So basically, we can expect that the readings of JTWC will be more at the higher level than the 10-minute sustained wind measurement that Pag-asa and JMA uses. I hope that clarifies the confusion.
I mean, Super Typhoon status starts at 240 kilometers per hour. This is at least 280
In JDWC.
in 1 minute sustained winds. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and new questions coming about certain locations as well. Of course, there's always people flooding in and out. Another question about Laguna, if you want to pick that up real quick, Paul.
So, what was the question?
About Laguna, what kind of general impacts they're going to say there? Someone asked if it's going to be safe there. I mean, considering typhoon impacts are possible, I wouldn't like to call it safe.
Yeah. So basically, when you look at Pag-asa's track right now, along with GTWC and JMAs, they're already going, they're already agreeing on a little bit closer to Laguna. So probably you might get signal number 2 to signal number 3 there with light strafted winds, devastating winds, devastating rain. So probably at low-lying areas there, you might get flooded. Yeah.
I would think so. Typhoon conditions more likely than not as well.
Yeah, I mean, again, we're kind of in a silver lining scenario where the storm's small size means that those harshest conditions, those typhoon sustained winds, and especially those super typhoon sustained winds, are going to be confined to a relatively small area. We're talking the harshest winds are going to be within 30 kilometers or so of the exact center. But regardless, damaging winds are still going to be extending upwards of 200 plus kilometers from the center as the storm comes on shore, particularly on the northern half. The southern side is going to have a smaller wind field, so even if the storm comes down and, say, makes landfall in southern Catanduanes and then moves through central Bicol and very southern areas of Luzon, for example, Manila will still see gale force sustained winds and could, if the wind field expands a bit before making landfall, get near typhoon sustained winds in such a scenario. Right now, at least, the track forecast still overall would call for them, along with Laguna and some of the other areas we've been mentioning in south central Luzon, to receive typhoon conditions. So everyone there that's watching this should be rapidly finishing any preparations. And we went over this a bit earlier, but this is going to potentially make landfall in the very early hours of the morning and start moving through more land areas during the early morning. So by the time you wake up, it's highly possible that your window of repair is already well over and stronger impacts that are making it unsafe to continue preparations or go outdoors will already be occurring.
And like you said there, Strat, I mean, this is a compact system we're talking about here. This isn't, a large, huge typhoon we're talking about here. This is a relatively compact system, and that's probably one of the main reasons why this typhoon has been able to intensify as much as it did, because of its compact size. Usually with smaller typhoons, it takes them a lot less, time to rapidly intensify here and get going here. And we easily saw that with this typhoon here, Super Typhoon Goni. We would have like a bigger typhoon. It'll take a little bit longer for it to intensify, up to even close to the same magnitude that Goni is right now. So just keep in mind, this is a fairly compact system, but that doesn't mean we stop taking this, typhoon seriously here. Just because, it's not a large typhoon does not mean it can't give you guys life-threatening and deadly impacts.
Looks big enough from where I'm sitting now.
By the way, we had a question. Maybe for the newcomers, we'll just repeat the answer for this question, but here it is anyway. Is there a possibility for the storm to weaken at landfall? Absolutely. Yeah.
Possibility for it to weaken before landfall, but those chances are starting to fade, believe it or not, because it looks like it's intensifying again. I'm sorry to break that news, but that's how it appears on the rapid scan right now. I'm not going to jump to any conclusions. We're sticking with our intensity that we started at 2 hours ago. If you have just joined us, this is Force 13 Live. It's 2 minutes past 10 in the Philippines, and the 11 p.m. advisory will be out at the end of this hour, and that's when we'll be wrapping up our coverage tonight. but we will be back on the air as soon as we think this storm is going to make landfall imminently to run landfall coverage. So who knows what time in the morning that will be, but we'll be there, don't worry about that. Whether it's 4, 5, 6 in the morning, I'm not sure just yet, but any of those possibilities are on the table. And we'll find out whether those signal 4 warnings have extended, or indeed whether there might be signal 5 warnings.
Yeah, and just to reiterate, at least for landfall, the timing's going to matter a bit on where exactly it does come on shore. If this thing dodges Catanduanas, barely, a landfall will be pushed off by another couple hours, especially if it tries to somehow do that to the north, although that isn't particularly likely. If this tries to make landfall in Catanduanas instead, then we're talking about a landfall initially there a couple hours before we see a landfall in Bicol in that scenario.
Is Typhoon Goni similar to Hurricane Andrew?
Oh,
Stronger than
size.
Hurricane Andrew.
yeah,
Maybe
stronger.
it's size, but I don't think in terms of intensity at this point.
What are the chances of the typhoon changing its track before it hits landmass and as it traverses through it? Time's running out for it to change track before striking landmass. Catanduanes is now underneath the minus 70 degree cloud tops and soon to be the minus 80 degree cloud tops. Things are going to get very real there shortly if they aren't already. And I imagine in this storm, given its small size, the conditions will escalate very quickly indeed.
I mean, unfortunately, there's no way really around that. If there's going to be any track deviation right now from the expectations, it would be expected to be a bit to the south again of what we're seeing prior. So that would mean instead of right now, at least barely clipping the northern coast of Catanduanes or moving more into it, trying to make landfall more in the southern portion of the island or potentially trying to dodge it. Of course, there is still a possibility of a last-second deviation to the north, which would spare Catanduanes from the worst impacts of the system, but that sadly looks to be decreasing in odds right now quite a bit.
It still actually looks like it's moving southwest more than the west movement that has been forecasted. When you look at that too.
Yeah, and I think probably one of the stories with this storm is going to be how people almost caught off guard and having to prepare last second, because we're talking about a system that, earlier this week when we were doing live streams about hurricane data hitting the United States and Malave moving into the Vietnam area, was expected to be maybe a tropical storm or forming as it moved into the Visayas region. We're seeing a storm move in just a little bit north of the Visayas region into Bicol now, but instead of that, we've seen this be a Category 5 super typhoon for over 36 hours consecutively now, and over 175 miles an hour sustained for at least 24 hours straight. So expectations, that officials and everyone was using were really shattered and continue to be. The unfortunate thing from that means that because that happened within a shorter window to landfall, that resource deployment, public messaging and stuff was a bit more delayed because the initial message wasn't really expecting this to occur.
Questions about rainfall expectations. We're still looking at least 300 millimeters near the center of the storm, probably more by this point. And as we'll see if we get more rain info in a moment, but also we had a question about, it's already slipped my mind actually, there was another question about whether it could spawn tornadoes.
Strat, I think Strat can answer that.
I mean, while tropical cyclones can technically spawn tornadoes, all can technically, you're talking about a region of the world that wouldn't be particularly conducive for such an event to occur. So that's why you don't hear us talking too much about, tornado outbreaks in general, about Western Pacific typhoons. What would be much more concerned about, let's say, for a landfall in the Carolinas, in the United States, or even in Louisiana, for example, like we saw with Zeta.
Well, let's just remind ourselves that with winds of maybe 180 miles an hour, at least 175, this is a 200-mile wide tornado.
Yeah,
In
I mean
effect.
that's definitely the way to put it. To be fair, I guess a lot of times people, that are focusing on severe weather will talk about that, but in reality, if you have a storm that's 175 mile an hour sustained wind, that is just, in essence, a large tornado in itself. If you want to use terminology.
I believe we're also joined on the line by Tim. Are you there?
I am Nathan. Thanks for having me in studio. Currently at work, but I wanted to chip in here for a couple of minutes on the analysis and commentary that we've been given. Obviously, Gungy is a very dangerous system. I believe last check still is stage 7 on the CDPS.
Stage 7.
Put that I think Devin's maintained it as a stage 7 for the last 2 days. To put that in perspective, I know some of the viewers are asking, is it similar to Hurricane Andrew? In terms of CDPS, it is.
Or worse.
Or worse, yeah, depending. But for some of the viewers that are wondering about the signal warnings that aren't familiar with Pegasus setup, I did a little bit of research on them. Your signal 2 warnings is basically Pegasus equivalent of a tropical storm warning. Signal 3 is basically your hurricane warning, and then I know we've had the signal 4. That is basically Pegasus equivalent of saying anticipate category 2 to category 3 conditions in and around those signal 4 warning areas. And if we go above 4 and we get those signal 5, then you're talking basically category 3 higher conditions. Just to put it in perspective for those that are not familiar with the Pegasus signal warning system.
Signal 4 and 5, you'll want to get out of those areas if possible.
Absolutely. Your signal 4s over here in the U.S. is equivalent to the National Weather Service issuing an extreme wind warning, which we've had those happen over here in the States, and they're not something to take lightly. We had them during Laura, and we saw the damage that it caused. So, yeah, for anybody in Luzon, Central Visayas, I know Strat's been saying it, and I've been saying it to our members in our public Discord. You need to get your preparations done because you're running out of time very quickly.
You can indeed join the conversation on our Discord server, discord.gg/force13, for live chat with anyone who turns up, basically. And that's always online when we're off the air. We'll be finishing at the end of this hour for the time being. Of course, we'll be back when the storm is pretty much making landfall to run landfall coverage. It's going to be a big moment, that probably, because this storm may still be a Category 5. We are putting a gap in between, though, because we don't think the storm's going to get there probably for another 7 hours or so. And I would recommend rest for those who are still ahead of the storm, who have prepared, because you're going to need it for the early hours and, depending where you are, the later hours of tomorrow.
And that really also goes to the messaging of, the time of day there right now. Of course, for people like myself on the East Coast of America, the Philippines are exactly 12 hours apart. So it's past 10 p.m. local time for the Philippines right now. A lot of people are going to be going to sleep soon. If you're in Bicol or South or Central Luzon, that means that, by the time you wake up, whether you're waking up really early in the morning to be actively awake during the storm's passage, or if you're just trying to get a good night's sleep and you feel safe and secure with your preparations that you've done, that the time to prepare is really over tonight. Obviously it's going to be getting very dark outside if it isn't already for a lot of these places in the Philippines. And at that point, especially with conditions set to rapidly deteriorate very soon, it will not be safe to go outside anymore or continue any further preparations to advance the system. I will say the government's been very proactive in making sure that there are evacuation orders that people are heeding very seriously. Over 200,000 people were ordered to evacuate ahead of this storm, and hopefully those people are heeding those orders, particularly for the low-lying areas that are set to be impacted.
As
Yeah,
we've seen on the
because-
screen for a couple minutes here, I just want to point this out. Isaac's showing us radar imagery and the eye visible now on radar.
Yeah, really clear there. Before you go on about whatever else you were going to say, somebody was asking in the chat. I'm sure a lot of people are also asking us and not familiar with the CDPS scale. I want to, if either you or Tim could perhaps tell people what exactly a CDPS Stage 7 type situation is here, if you don't mind.
Yeah, Devin would be able to explain a lot better, but the CDPS, which is the Cyclone Potential Destruction Scale, is a metric that one of our team members, Devin, put together to really quantify the damage from a tropical cyclone. This being known as a Stage 7 is a very catastrophic kind of system. The best analog that I can think of off the top of my head is Hurricane Andrew of 1992 in terms of the damage potential that we could be seeing. And if you need to have an idea, just look at Miami-Dade County in Central Florida during Hurricane Andrew, and that's what you can see for damage. Now we're not saying that it's going to be all of the Philippines area, but where the direct landfall, which would be along the Bicol, Catanduanes region of the Philippines, could see that kind of damage.
Stage 7, catastrophic on the cyclone destruction potential scale. Let's take some more questions. Start your message with Force 13 all in text. We're here for another 45 minutes, maybe just a little bit more than that. What's the forecast storm surge potential? Pagasa saying that it could be 3 meters in pretty much the signal 4 warning area, I assume.
Yeah. If there's any solace with the system, the fact that it's pretty small in size, we're talking, at most 115 or so nautical miles for gale force winds, means that the storm surge total won't be pushed up as much as it would be, say, with a larger storm with this intensity, say, Mancut, for example, would be able to produce a much more significant storm surge. Someone's asking, Nathan, do you get the eye temperature right now for the storm?
You caught me off guard there, just a moment. We'll get the...
I'm sorry, I'll see if I can take some other questions real quick as well.
I've noticed that this storm really just... Yeah, Andrew is suspected in me, and not probably that you probably want to hear.
And if you have any
Keep in mind
questions
this-
right now, go ahead, Isaac, I'm sorry.
I was just going to quickly say, keep in mind, this is stronger than Andrew at this point in time here. Andrew was, I believe, if my mind serves me right, it was 175 miles per hour, 165 at landfall here. This is, a lot stronger than that at this point. So just keep that in mind when we are talking about Andrew territory here. This is stronger than Andrew at this point in time. Srath?
Someone's asking as well, what is the winds in the hour right now? Compared to GTWC with our estimates saying 175 miles per hour. That's around 280 to 285 kilometers an hour sustained wind. So an extremely powerful Category 5 system right now at its very core. Fortunately, it's a very small system, so those winds are kept to a pretty small area, but still extremely dangerous for Catanduanes, Bicol, and Luzon where it's approaching. If you have any other questions you want answered, start your message with Force 13 and text or at Force 13 in the YouTube chat. Lights up the message in bright orange, and I'm sure Paul's keeping up with the Facebook chat as well. And speaking of Paul, someone's asking how this will affect the area around Laguna, and Laguna Lake in particular. I know he's in 7 himself, but right now at least...
Mike's also here, I believe.
Oh, Ike, who's actually in Laguna. Do you want to take that one then?
The storm surge in Laguna won't be possible, but it will be only mostly the soil become saturated with water.
Fortunately for Laguna at least, and Laguna Lake too, the southern deviations in the track mean that the odds of the harshest typhoon conditions are dropping. They are still very likely to see gale conditions at minimum, get some substantial rainfall, at least a little bit of surge along the lake area as well. But because this isn't coming as far north as expected, say 12 to 24 hours ago, the odds of them getting major typhoon conditions, potentially up towards Category 3 equivalent, are going down just because the odds of the direct center of the storm going over them are dropping right now as well.
Let's see. So, okay, someone just asked what is going to happen to Dolomite Beach in Manila Bay. Dolomite.
Definitely will be washed. Black sand will be washed in.
Okay, so do you guys wanna know the story behind that or no?
Go ahead, why not?
So there has been this cleanup, Manila Bay beautification project, and the plan was to add dolomite sand to.
I've heard about this actually.
Yeah. Now, during the passage of Molave, I can you back me up with this? There's actually was that black sand that has resurfaced, and then some of the dolomite sand actually was washed away to the sea.
Yeah. And
So go ahead.
black sand and trash was washed in. The white sand was washed out when waves were really high.
So basically,
That's what happened with Molape. Now that Goni is now approaching, maybe we could see um, a wipeout. Let's just call it like that. A wipeout of the sand. Some of it may remain, but most of it may be washed away, depending on the waves in Manila Bay, of course.
We've got a new intensity estimate, and I'm afraid it's bad news. We're estimating that this storm has intensified further now and currently has winds near 180 miles per hour sustained, which is 295 kilometers per hour, I think, or 290, and the central pressure down to 890.
I mean, so this storm really just continues to, I don't want to say defy the odds, but that's basically what it's doing, fighting off 3 eye-wall replacement cycles almost to maintain intensity despite, storms really not being able to hold 175 miles an hour plus for about 36 consecutive hours now.
Which is what this storm has really done.
Yeah,
This is one for the record books, really.
for sure. There's also a question coming in, or this is a little while ago, asking about Camarines Norte, which is in far northern Bicol, a bit northwest of Naga. What kind of impacts do you expect there? If this was 24 hours ago, it was looking like the potential for the system to pass barely north of there, if not clip a landfall right in that area. And in fact, that's what the latest JCWC cone still calls for, although that in itself is over 8 hours old now. And since then, we've seen a much more continuous southwestward shift in the storm to the point where it's more likely right now to see an initial Catanduanes landfall and then potentially try to move over that region afterwards than what was expected 8 to 12 hours ago. Still, that means that major typhoon conditions are more likely than not to occur in that particular region. If I'm not mistaken, there are currently Signal 4 warnings in effect there too. So obviously an extremely dangerous situation for that particular region.
So a reminder, we've just upgraded this storm once again to winds of 180 miles per hour sustained, that's around 290 kilometers per hour, with an estimated central pressure at 890 millibars, an eye temperature indicating plus 10 right now, cloud tops extending all around the eye, minus 80s at least, minus 80 at least, and some areas heading slowly towards minus 90 degrees. Those lower temperatures denote stronger, not necessarily directly stronger, but higher cloud tops, which usually corresponds to a stronger high wall structure. And we're here for another 40 minutes to discuss this storm with questions until the next Pegasa update at 11 p.m. And we'll be back with more live coverage early in the morning when the storm makes landfall. In the meantime, after we finish streaming tonight, it will hand over to our automated stream, which will show you the latest imagery live throughout the night. And you can also communicate through our social platforms and our Discord server. Strap. You can say that.
Actually, I see a question from Riar. I'm not sure if you see it earlier, but someone asked, CPTM type of money and the level type will be variable to type in Zhang Shang or Mil Neo instead of switch. We already touched on that a bit, and to sum it up for you, it could be worse than Zhang Shang. You need to make sure that you're prepared.
That was a pretty bad one, although yes, this one could be worse, at least in some places. But let's not forget that typhoons and all hurricanes and storms like this, some areas that don't get severely impacted on one occasion might get worse conditions the next occasion, whilst another area that was hit worse won't get it as bad. We've got to take a look at what's in front of us right now, and comparisons quite often aren't particularly helpful, especially when talking about effects on land.
Yeah, I mean, right now, at least, what we can say is a fact, this is a Category 5 super typhoon, which is hard to see losing Category 5 status before it comes up shore. Even so, it would still be very likely to maintain super typhoon strength, which is against expectations even from yesterday. So the expectation for landfall strength has been pushed up substantially, obviously highlighting the extreme danger that the system poses. Fortunately, again, it's smaller in size, so those impacts aren't going to be as massively widespread as a larger system, say a Mancut, for example, of a couple of years ago, which made landfall in northern Luzon. But the areas that do get hit by this before are going to see extreme impacts.
Yeah, and I just have two questions. First one I want to touch on is why it's from Nigeria, and basically he's asking like a comparison from for this storm to an Atlantic storm. If I were to compare the one from the Atlantic to the Dorian, I don't.
No. You're looking more towards Wilma.
Oh yeah.
Gilbert? No, not Gilbert. Gilbert's too large. Gilbert, in terms of structure, how it looks like Gilbert a little bit, although it's much smaller than that.
Yes, exactly. And the other question is related to Lava, and he's asking about the missing year. And
Where's that, sorry?
Cavite.
Cavite?
The guy,
Oh,
Yeah. It's Cavite.
the guy died. Yeah.
yes. Well,
Yeah.
that area will
I don't
be
know.
expecting
Can you answer that?
typhoon conditions, most likely, in the whole of Batangas.
Yeah, I mean, if this was, say, a day ago, we'd be expecting typhoon conditions further north, but the south deviations are putting Batangas right more the direct risk of typhoon conditions.
And for the Tagaytay, I'm not necessarily sure. If that's close to the Tonga, then yeah, you could be taking conditions.
Cool.
The guy they will definitely have that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep,
It's in the vicinity of Taal Lake. So near Manila, near Batangas, right in the middle of them.
a couple more questions.
We'll just get on that in just a moment. Any change to the conditions at your place? Because you're the closest person on here to the typhoon right now.
Not really. There's a small breeze. No wind.
So still fairly
Long
quiet.
before the storm.
Naturally.
Yeah, I like to build them.
But no, the new JTWC forecast code has just come out, actually.
Okay.
Not sure if anyone can pull it up on the stream. I'll toss the link in.
No, we've already got it
Chat
here.
here.
I think Isaac's showing
Oh,
us.
perfect.
Is it number
So
15?
southward shift in that.
Is it number 15? The cone number 15?
I think that's up to date. Yeah, that's up to
Is that
date,
one?
that one.
Okay, so this is 15 then, okay.
They take it 18 miles north of Manila. Or is it south?
That's probably slightly south at this point. I mean, they're still
Yeah,
expecting
18 miles south of Manila there.
They're still expecting a sharper turn back to the west-northwest now, although notably they are calling for a landfall of Baton Juan and then a Bicol, which they weren't before. You know, notably though, that initial point is 3 hours ago, almost 2.5 hours ago. Since then, we've almost certainly seen more of a slightly south track of their center point. So if we don't see a more consistent and immediate due west shift, then we might see this get shifted south again as well.
That there is pretty much suggesting a Category 5 landfall. The next point on that graphic is after Catanduane's landfall, and it's still a borderline Category 5 there.
Not the satellite group, it's actually still it's going southwest, it seems like.
It is, yes. As long as that remains the case, you'll keep having to shift that cone further south.
And a couple more questions coming in too, this time about potentially later this week as well, about Atsani. While its exact intensity still isn't particularly clear, that could also be another Philippine impact that we have to keep an eye out for as we head into later this upcoming week. And for those curious about Fujiwara impacts, these storms won't be kind of mending around with each other in any way. They won't be getting close enough to directly interact. However, Raleigh's very strong outflow is actually what's causing Atsani to remain so weak right now. It's completely shearing the system to bits. But as Raleigh moves west and west-northwest over the next 2 days, pretty quickly in the South China Sea, and the system moves and stalls briefly, moving northwest, they'll be far enough apart where that won't be a major issue anymore.
Looking at it on the JTWC track forecast here from Isaac, and you can see there, I think that's gone further north than what they were saying, but the cone is enormous, so they're not very confident on that.
Yeah, I wanted to note, they don't have it, yeah, like you said, as close to the Philippines as it is in the last forecast from cone, and they also have it peaking a little weaker than originally forecast. They forecasted it to peak, or near peak intensity as 105 knot typhoon. Now they have it peak as a 80 knot typhoon, but what's near peak as an 80 knot typhoon there.
So that's another one to watch in the wake of Goni. And as we go back to this imagery, you can see Atsani on the right hand side. That's even blowing up some convection there as well. But quite obviously, Goni is still the one to watch. If you missed it just a few moments ago, we have now given it winds of 180 miles per hour, which is sustained. That's 295 kilometers per hour, and an estimated central pressure, a new low at 890.
You know, it's just extremely unfortunate that as the storms continue to approach land that we have not seen any sort of substantial weakening. We've seen some fluctuations over the past 24 hours through this is the second eyewall replacement cycle in the past 24 hours now. But, you know, that just hasn't translated into the storm dropping any substantial strength. You know, I'm sure Isaac can concur with this. Last night, Eastern time at least, so the morning time that the Philippines is heading into early afternoon, it was looking like that eyewall replacement cycle was going to do some more damage to the storm. The minus 80 degree cloud top rings had completely dissipated, and we were hoping that would remain the case, but it just really hasn't translated to any serious weakening of the storm.
Yeah, I went to bed last night thinking that, you know, it was fortunately starting to weaken here, and hopefully it would make a weaker landfall and forecast, but that's, of course, not the case anymore. I woke up and I saw the cloud tops bounce back to what they were yesterday morning, and just really amazed at how it's been persistent on trying to at least maintain its intensity here as it nears landfall in the Philippines, an extremely dangerous situation.
Let's take a look back at that radar imagery again that you're showing us, Isaac. Is that still the very latest?
It's up to 9:30 in the morning my time and Central Standard Time, so 10:30. Yeah, 9:30 p.m. Yeah, 10:30 p.m. in Central.
What can you tell us from the radar there? Anything
I
that
can
you know?
still, I can see maybe, it's hard to tell because it's still kind of in the far range of this radar site here, but it looks like maybe the outer eye wall here maybe trying to get weaker here. I can't really notice it as well as I used to here in the satellite radar.
There's two radar zones there.
Yeah.
Qualities, but it definitely looks like Captain Duanes is getting hit right now.
Yeah, oh yeah, most definitely. We could easily see that inner eye wall there on the radar site. It's quite clearly there pronounced. That's where you're going to see those category 5 force winds is right in that little inner eye wall there. You see passing through the radar site.
Outer band rains also affecting the Bicol region and also for significant parts of Samar right now by the looks of it, even down to Leyte. Can't quite see down there, but looks like there's some rain passing through there too.
Yeah, I can't say it for the life of me. Catanduanes is pretty much right under the first really major rain band this typhoon has to offer here. You can't see the islands, of course, because it's right under all that rain there. And don't mind this little area on the top left of your screen. That's a radar area. That's not like a super cellophane stationary. That's a radar area. Don't mind that.
Yes, but well, it's creeping in. The thing is about this storm, though, it's so small. I just hope people don't get caught by surprise because you'll see conditions rapidly get worse in the course of 3 to 6 hours, really.
Yeah, in that outer eye wall, you know, if it's still really pronounced in there, like you said earlier too as well, it's kind of hard to say because it's between two radar sites here. So it's kind of hard to say at this point. It still could easily be there, but I really can't tell. But if it is there, in that outer eye wall, you're probably going to easily probably going to see typhoon conditions in that one, and then they can see a little bit of a
Typhoon
lull.
conditions there, and then a lull, and all of a sudden, 180 mile an hour winds.
Yeah, you're going to get a little bit of a lull, and then you're going to probably think, oh, it's probably the worst, it's probably past, and then bam, you're going to get those Cat 5 winds in that inner eye walls there in it.
Thankfully, the eye is so small that not a huge area is going to get that. You're quite
Speaking of,
unlucky if you did get the eye.
Speaking of the eye, how big is the eye in the latest estimates right now?
Yeah, so we had it 13 miles not long ago. The latest now is, it's hard to tell, something like 13 or 14 miles. It's not really changing, but I must say the latest imagery is still looking pretty good. I really hope it doesn't decide it wants to intensify some more before landfall.
I mean, we've been in this phase where, you know, when it first became a Category 5 super typhoon, expectations were, okay, it's probably going to peak within the next 12 hours, and then, you know, go on a much more serious weakening trend. And of course, it did reach its first peak then, according to our estimates. But unlike expectations, it just hasn't really begun to wind down whatsoever. So at basically every point, we've had to reiterate, you know, further intensifications possible in the next, you know, 12 hours or so. And even now, unfortunately, that's still the case up until potential landfall in Bicol or Catanduanes. You know, and I think just to really push the very important point too, I was mentioning it earlier. For a lot of people, you know, it's late in the evening now. It's too dark outside to really continue any preparations. And if you're in Catanduanes or Bicol, the early morning hours, you know, 3 to 6 a.m. are potentially when the system could begin to make landfall. So the worst conditions will be beginning in the very early hours of the morning. So, you know, for those that still, or maybe a bit further out in Luzon, that have the last second to prepare, please make sure you're taking advantage of that and heeding any orders given by local officials for your safety.
As stated in the last hour, Manila is one of the many areas in southern Luzon that could get typhoon conditions, over a 50% chance there. round about the 50% mark is where Manila is. So coin toss on whether typhoon conditions happen there or not, but 50% chance for that is quite a high percentage when we're talking about these kinds of things. And tropical storm conditions pretty much a given, destructive winds possible.
Yeah, I mean, definitely would say, and those typhoon conditions, as the storm gets closer to land, will become more certain for certain areas. So unless we see a more serious shift to the south, you can see those odds go up a bit. You know, again, to highlight, it is fortunate, if there's anything fortunate, that because the storm is relatively small in size, that those typhoon winds really barely extend 35 nautical miles at most from the center. So we're talking, 60 to 80 kilometers is the maximum extent of typhoon sustained winds in any quadrant.
Just want to give people a projection of timing. The GFS model that came out earlier, just before we went on the air, suggesting that the storm will be just east of Catanduanes by what time is that? I'm trying to figure this out. By 2 a.m. And then by 8 a.m. it's expected to be over Bicol, probably Albay, and then by 2 p.m. it will probably could even be over Marinduque, and then towards Manila by evening.
Yeah,
Still not buying these models. Models think this storm is going to collapse in the most ridiculous way. I mean, we'd like it to happen, but there's no chance this is going to be a 45-mile-an-hour tropical storm by the time it gets to Manila. There's no chance of that.
no, I mean, something that has on its side to maintain intensity at least is that, it's moving at around 20 kilometers an hour, so right now it's going to be picking up a bit in forward speed. So, like you said, for those times, in about a little over 24 to 30 hours from now, this thing is going to be moving fully into the South China Sea and be clearing out of the Philippines. So that forward movement speed is going to give it a bit less time over land to rapidly weaken from more rugged terrain. And also the fact that it's just making landfall and moving further south of prior expectations. It's not going over the very high mountain chains in central and northern Luzon. It's going to have slightly less mountainous terrain interaction with the core, which could limit weakening somewhat, although it is still expected to drop numerous categories, at least in intensity, while over the Philippines.
Lovely crazy storm. We'll be getting an update from the gas soon. About 20 minutes is when their forecast, or expected to update their forecast. And hopefully we'll get that information rather quickly. Then we'll be finishing up our commentary here, but don't worry if you're staying tuned in. This should, it automatically does its strat, doesn't it? It transfers to the automated stream, which shows all the latest imagery.
It takes a couple minutes at times, but if you refresh your page, say 5 minutes after the stream ends, you'll automatically be back at the automated stream. But it is also in the description as well. It's below the synopsis and information about the storm, the link to that. And that will be in the chat later, along with, if people want to keep watching things directed to go watch there.
And then it won't be long until we're back live commentary again for the storm's landfall at this rate, which looks like it's going to be, we're still thinking maybe 4 or 5 in the morning if it makes landfall in Catanduanes, but if it makes landfall in Bicol, and it's going to be a little bit later than that, maybe 6, 7 a.m.
Yeah, I mean, even so, we're looking, say, 8 hours or so at most from our first landfall. And, because that's going to unfortunately be in the early morning hours when people are really waking up, the time for repair is really over, especially for Catanduanes and entering Bicol now, where conditions are only going to rapidly deteriorate from here on out. So for anyone watching this in those areas, this isn't really the time to go outside as long as you're already heated instructions in the same place, because if you think you need to do something last minute to prepare, and you're already in a relatively sturdy protected area, if you get caught outdoors, take a little longer than expected in the dark, and things get really bad really quickly, you're putting yourself in an unsafe position.
Thomas is one of our Force 13 forecasters. He's put out the latest cone from us on this. Well, I thought we'd be able to get it a little bit more centered onto the screen, but you can still see it at any rate. Currently going with that 180 miles an hour. In 12 hours time, expecting 155 miles an hour over Luzon there, and then down to Category 1 in 24 hours with 85 mile an hour winds. So yeah, that's about right. Although the JWC forecasting that it will still be 110 miles an hour by the time it exits the Philippines, which is interesting. That's still about 175 or 180 kilometers per hour. If it went over Manila, that could be the winds that you could get.
Yeah, I mean, that's why we already have the signal and warnings in place for Manila. It definitely would not be surprising to see those go pretty soon, maybe at the next update up to Signal 2. And then we'll probably see much more widespread Signal 3 warnings coming in pretty soon, and potentially more widespread Signal 4 warnings, either this update spreading further north into the cold, and have them potentially spreading into southern Luzon.
Yep, we'll wait up for the update from Pegasa, which is due in just over 15 minutes. This is what it currently says. Signal 4 warnings for Catanduanes, as you'd expect, for part of Camarines Sur. Signal 3 for much of the rest of the Bicol region and northern Samar. Signal 2 extending up northwards to Aurora province, including Manila, and to the south there, covering at least part of Samar as well. Masbate, Romblon, Mindoro, and the very northern tip of Panay, and Signal 1 for those areas on either side of those that have the high warnings. In Luzon, extending as far north as Isabela. Reminder what Pegasa have been saying, as of 8 p.m. they still don't have it as a super typhoon. Winds of 215 kilometers per hour near the center, gusting to 265.
I wonder if it's still gonna be the same, their 11 p.m. update.
If I'm not mistaken, right, there's the JMA's forecast track that shows some re-intensification right before landfall.
Where?
In the South China Sea, I mean. Yeah, not before the Philippines. Okay, so that's also a change to keep in mind later on, too. The JTWC doesn't call for that right now. They're saying they actually decreased the expectations for Vietnam landfall from 55 knots yesterday down to barely 45 knots, maybe 40 knots, depending on the time you're looking at. But the JMA is expecting the system right now, at least, to regain some strength in the South China Sea, although it is more likely than not that it won't be a typhoon when it makes landfall in Vietnam.
So there we have it right now. Any new changes with the storm structure though? Just looking again at this satellite imagery, any suggestion that, no, the suggestions are that it's strengthening, I'm afraid to say. But that's what I'm seeing right now. Latest imagery, it's a very interesting eye. It's sort of gradual on the eye wall to the eye. It's more gradual than you'd expect normally.
What I really want to see, if anything else, because structure-wise, I'm talking a bit about this high wall replacement cycle. I'd want to see if there's any microwave passes that they probably won't come in new ones at least before we go off the air in about 15 minutes or so. But at least between now and our next live event, if we can get a better key on that structure, because the eye wall replacement cycle from last night was obviously very apparent in microwave. We're seeing the structure of the storm be inhibited much more significantly then, and even at the start of the stream as well, it was much more apparent about the new one that was ongoing. We saw some microwave shots. We saw a lot of eye wobbles and oscillations, and the cloud tops getting a bit frayed and messed up a little bit as that trying to keep its home center. But the ability for the storm to fight off numerous eye wall replacement cycles has been quite remarkable.
I think radar would probably tell probably about half the story at this point. It's not, of course, full lane range here, but you get still kind of see the apparent concentric firewall still with the Super Typhoon right now.
That inner eye wall is definitely there, Spread. I don't see that this is an active eye wall replacement cycle.
What I will say as well, yeah, I mean, it's not really contracting to try to choke it off, despite some of the earlier imagery we've seen. You would typically expect a storm that's undergone, 2 separate eye wall replacement cycles in the span of 24 hours, and at least trying to start a third potentially to have a much wider wind field than what we have with this. We're still talking typhoon winds extend at most 50 to 60 kilometers from the center. Gale force winds extend at most 200 kilometers from the center. If we have a very strong storm that's gone through multiple replacement cycles, you would typically expect a bit of a larger wind field than that. So if there's any saving grace or silver lining to the storm right now, it is going to be that the area of worst impact is going to be confined to a very small area.
Now, as of 29 minutes past 10, the center of the eye is now 144 miles off the coast of Typhoon.
Say, looking at
Did I
radar.
say miles? That's kilometers, just to be sure.
Well, I must say, looking at radar here, I mean, earlier in the frames, you could really see that pronounced. I don't know if we could stop it here before. Take it back here a little bit. You can see there the really pronounced concentric eye walls there. You see the outer eye wall, and of course you see the inner eye wall quite clearly there. And then in the last frame, let me see if I can take it to the last frame here, 40. You can see again that inner eye wall is still very much so present, but the outer eye wall doesn't really look too as pronounced as was earlier. Now keep in mind this radar site is down near Tacloban, Philippines. So it's kind of far in its range here of this radar site. So it could be that the radar site may not be able to really pick it up here, and the radar over here will be able to pick it up a lot more clearly here. So it's kind of hit or miss here whether or not that the outer eye wall is still very much present, or if it's starting to weaken here.
There's a bit of a dead spot there for a couple more hours.
I can personally tell you that the outer eye wall right now is fine. The inner eye wall is clinging on for its life.
And that's the voice of Devon, who is our chief hurricane analyst. All across the world, he's been tracking storms for many years. And, well, this one is one that you've been, well, to put it politely, going crazy about recently.
Next team, me.
What's that?
I think that was an accident, like the audio glitch there real quick.
Anyway, yeah, that happens. Anyways, I'm just now looking up here, trying to process all the information here. And, with all these cones that have been produced, it's like, oh, it's gonna be a Cat 3 at landfall. Up it maintained intensity for a little bit longer. Now it's gonna be more like Cat 4. And now we're talking about the storm being less than 200 kilometers away from landfall, 185 miles an hour, and it's about to complete an EWRC, which if it completes before landfall, you're talking about another 10 to 15 miles an hour added on top of it.
Really?
Just an extremely dangerous situation.
What makes you think it could intensify another 15 miles an hour in the next 6?
The eye coming out fully and the inner eye wall completely dying. Will it do that in 6 hours? Probably not, but if it does, that's what'll happen.
The latest radar frame right here.
But the inner eye wall right now is clinging on for dear life. It's literally doing loops on the edge of the outer eye wall, and you can very clearly see that on your infrared imagery of choice.
Yeah, that's quite clear. There it is again on the radar imagery, so that's a new frame there. We might be able to see the northern side of the eye fairly shortly. How often do these images update?
Every 10 minutes.
10 minutes.
So this is really standard for tropical cyclones that are as intense as Super Typhoon Goni, and this is definitely a super typhoon. There's really no disputing that one. I mean, we're talking, it's already 180 miles an hour, and it's a very ugly 180 miles an hour, which I can't even believe that is a complete oxymoron, but that's legitimately the case here. You've got the cloud tops going all the way around the eye. Negative 81s have been all the way around the eye. I've been watching this since like 5 in the morning here on the East Coast. We're talking about 6 hours. It had those cloud tops going all the way around the eye then. The eye looks better now than it did then. And the cloud tops have, if anything, gotten a bit colder since then. So, yikes.
Well, that triggered us to put our estimate up just slightly, and maybe more intensification ongoing.
Yeah, I'm hoping that it doesn't. I'm hoping that the inner eye wall just clings on for dear life and doesn't just collapse. Because if it does, that outer eye wall is going to contract and become a new one, and then, yeah, you pretty much get the picture there. We don't want that. That would basically be like an Irma of 2017 scenario, if you remember that, where it was a Cat 4 for the longest time after passing north of Hispaniola. And it had a structure similar to this, and then literally in the final 2 hours before landfall, it actually ended up completing its eye wall replacement cycle and smacking Cuba as a Cat 5.
We do indeed remember that one well. We covered it here too. Still looking at Isaac's imagery there. Look at that latest frame, the eye very clear on that one.
Yep, and this scale, this one I'm showing you, the rainbow infrared imagery, this is off the scale. This stops at negative 80 degrees Celsius here, and it's going off the scale here. And that's what all the white splotches you see there around the central left overcast. The studio of this storm is his cloud top temperatures, like what Devin said, over negative 80 degrees Celsius, which is just incredible. Yeah, I mean, it's pretty unfortunate too, considering last night that ring of minus 80s was completely dissipated during the hour replacement cycle. Then it was, feeling, we might see more significant weakening at that point.
Always
But
got
it's
the
really coming back
impression.
with the force.
Always got the impression it would come back.
I mean, I didn't want to have that impression, but we had seen, at least at the time, what it looked to end up being potentially more serious weakening, and that really just did not continue to materialize whatsoever. And we have, like everyone's been saying, we see clearly in the silent tree, full ring of negative 80s, and that eye looks to even be warming now in the latest frame, in particular. So an extremely dangerous situation right now for Catanduanes and Nicole and Luzon. There's an impossible way, there's no way to overstate the danger this represents.
Yeah. So, I'm going to ask you calculations in the background here because it's just crazy. I don't really have any other words to describe this. Nathan, I don't know if you're taking a look at rapid scan imagery, but taking a look at the frames, since I would say 1425Z, it looks like that we're starting to get minus 85 wrapped around the entire eye.
The entire eye. Okay.
I don't know if you're seeing the same thing. I might need to get my eyes checked. I'm hoping so. But it looks like minus 85 are starting to wrap around the eye as those 14.5.
It wouldn't surprise me. I'm not looking exactly at the very latest, but at the minute. But that wouldn't surprise me at all. And eye temperature, we've just got a reading of 14, so that could even encourage us to upgrade this again.
Please no.
Yeah, I
almost
hope
beyond
not as well.
It's almost beyond words to describe what we're seeing right now. You know, no one,
This thing's not moving. That's
Yeah.
just not happening.
yeah, I mean, no one really expected such a strength in the first place. And when, someone managed to get to Category 5, a little over 36 hours ago, the expectations were, oh, it's probably peaking off right about now. And it's not only gone past that point, but it's held past that point for the past 36 hours now, and it's showing no signs of slowing down whatsoever before landfall.
Yeah, like, we thought that this was going to take a Typhoon of, what's its name, from 2014 arc, where it would peak as a Cat 5 and then
Hagapit.
slowly weakening. What?
Hagapit, yes.
Yes, Typhoon Hagapit, where it would peak as a Cat 5, everyone would get super scared, and then it would slowly die as it went towards the Philippines. But, no, this is maintained. This is maintained.
We're not going to make any intensity decisions before we finish here, at least for now, but it does appear that it is strengthening again.
Just look at how in that last frame, I don't know if you could see that, but there's the yellow for the dry air there, the little tiny little splotch of dry air there that
Oh, right.
signifies how clear that eye is starting to get here. I don't know if we can stop it here in the last frame, but look at that.
That eye must only be about 8 miles wide now, though.
Remember that's the inner eye wall that's dying. So that might start to be getting to be collapsing here.
I'm thinking that might be the case. Have you got the radar again, Isaac? Any new radar frame?
It updates every 10 minutes. It's going to update in about 2 minutes.
Oh,
from
okay.
now. The latest frame is 10:50 Eastern.
And we're also waiting for Pegasus update. I don't know who will get it first. But I'm sure our team will be watching that closely. Paul's over there as well, Ike.
Yeah, I am.
Watching very closely indeed.
What is Pegasa saying in terms of rainfall?
A lot, I think. Heavy to intense rains. I'm not sure how they define that.
Yeah, it looks like it's going to be a little bit more than a foot, still around 15 inches, which honest
Usually
goodness
there's
hasn't
anything
been
that's
every
around,
day.
Yeah.
there's
So-
anything around 300 millimeters of rain.
300 millimeters of rain. Yeah, it's going to be more than that.
I mean, mountainous areas, of course, will see locally higher amounts, but I mean, just based on the sheer structure of this storm, and if we really get confirmed and sustained minus 80-degree cloud tops all the way around the eye, the rain rates in particular are going to, be shooting up higher than prior expectations too. So it wouldn't be surprising to see localized rainfall a bit higher.
There's not as much of a correlation there as you would think. It more correlates to how quickly the storm dissipates over land, rather than the actual intensity itself.
Well, now that you've mentioned it, I've got to throw this at you, Devon. Are you as baffled as I am, or maybe not as the case might be, that the GFS and the HWRF want to weaken this storm at a very high, very fast rate, from landfall in 6 hours, a Category 5 potentially, to a mid-range tropical storm by the time it leaves the Philippines? Is that complete nonsense like we think it is?
This thing's going to be passing over the most thin part of Luzon, right? Like,
Potentially.
just to the south of Manila.
Yeah.
Yep.
And what are the mountains like through that south part of the island? I don't know what the mountains are like through the south part of the island.
Just a few.
There are no mountains in the southern Luzon. Only mountains
Yeah,
are
what is it like compared to northern Luzon? Let's say Isabela province.
very flat.
That
Very
storm
different.
won't get up. that storm will be fine.
Now, the JTWC, they're saying that it will leave the Philippines probably as a high-end Category 2. That sounds more like it.
That sounds appropriate. I would say mid-range catches, but yeah, that sounds about right. Because we've seen that gracious enough to decide to put together size data storm. Rainfall hasn't changed, 15 inches. Size hasn't really changed either, honestly. Around 9-10 points. Big change. Landfall intensity.
Yeah.
160 knots. Because,
Really?
yeah, pretty much what we're going to be
Really?
looking at here.
You think this storm could make landfall with winds of 300 kilometers an hour?
That'd be great. 187 miles an hour, 300 kilometers.
There's a chance, in my opinion.
With 160 knots, 185, no, it would be 295 kilometers an hour.
Well, you get the point, but you think it's going to make landfall that strong?
Well, we don't see any reason why it's going to be weakening. Right now it's 155 knots, and it's more than likely going to go up a tick a little bit right before landfall. Because of the said completing eyewall replacement cycle. Like, what's going to make it weaken?
Does the new radar bring up a minute here, right?
Let's see it. Isaac?
Oh yeah, the 10 east, no, 11 in the morning Eastern frame came in, and you could see the northern eyewall more pronounced in the scan, and you could see still the outer eyewall there in the last frame there of the radar sight, getting a better and better look as time goes by here, so they get close, the eye gets closer to these radar sites in the Philippines.
Yeah, that inner eyewall is hanging on for dear life. Hang in there, buddy. Hang in there. Please. Take as much time as you need to die.
And just to remind people who might be confused, Edwin, why exactly is it a good thing that that eyewall persists?
It's not going to strengthen. It'll at least maintain intensity, but as long as that inner eyewall doesn't collapse, it won't strengthen.
We're just waiting for the 11 p.m. update from Pegasa. It's not come in here just yet, but I imagine there's a lot of traffic going to them right now, so it could get a little bit messy.
Oh, and if anyone cares, yes, that does make going a stage 8.
Stage 8 on the CDPS scale.
Yeah.
None
So
of the
that'll be the largest threat of the year. That beats Laura by a pretty significant margin.
And, I think it's important to point out, it does that despite its pretty small size, which is a feat in itself, too.
When you're scoring 28 points for wind alone, like it's only scoring 10 points for size, which is pretty small for a hurricane, typhoon, whatever, and 10 points for rain, which is about average, honestly. So, it's scoring below average for size, about average for rain. It's just when you're packing a landfall intensity of over 180 miles an hour, which that's a mid-range EF4 tornado, mind you, sustained winds for several hours. Not pretty. Not pretty at all.
Yeah, and in comparison to that, if this thing even got stronger, it would be basically it would just be scary.
Yeah, that's why I'm saying that I want this inner eyewall to just hang on as long as possible, because as long as that thing stays there, it's not going to strengthen. It'll maintain. It's not going to strengthen. I don't see, unless there is some critical failure or some very lucky increase in wind shear like an hour before landfall. I don't see this losing intensity from here.
Paul and Ike, any news at your end right now on the ground?
None, but I am refreshing Pag-asa's Facebook page and their website, maybe in case I can catch the new updates.
Okay.
Nothing much.
Yeah, I think we're a bit used to having the National Hurricane Center, the Atlantic update, 20 minutes ahead of time. So having something more on time comes as a bit of a unusual